Good morning. Today we're going to read Army Brats and we're on chapter 15. So did we get any video? Tom asked Charlotte. He was feeling a little shaky from the scare. The Baileys had biked home in record time and headed straight to Charlotte and Rosie's mom to debrief. Cupcake ran behind them. Charlotte and Rosie sat on the floor near the dollhouse while Tom leaned against Charlotte's bed. Cupcake cuddled next to him as he tried to catch his breath. Let's see, Charlotte said, tapping her camera app and holding up the screen. The first shot was Tom trying to open the front door and was nothing impressive. The next video was black. What's that supposed to be? Rosie asked. She had shed her goggles when they returned home from the house, but they'd left red rings pressed into the skin around her eyes. I was trying to film all that creepy stuff in the basement, Charlotte said, but I guess it was too dark for the phone. That was too bad. Tom was sure the basement stuffed with ghoulish things would make a good start for a video. Charlotte clicked on the last film clip. The shaking frame showed Tom's terrified face and then his mouth opening in a screech of doom. Tom's shoulders slumped. This was the opposite of what they wanted. In fact, if this video got out, he'd be Sergeant Wimpy for life. That was a real soup Sunday, Rosie said, the corners of her mouth pulling down. Tom decided not to remind her that the lingo was actually soup sandwich. Both conveyed the same meaning anyway, a big mess. Not really, Charlotte said. She had finished deleting the terrible clips and was starting to bounce a little, the way she did when she was excited about something. I mean, the video was a disaster, but there's obviously something going on at that house, and we're the only ones who know about it. So that's actually a pretty major discovery. Tom rubbed Cupcake's ears as he considered Charlotte's words. The video had been a fiasco, but all the evil-looking equipment and that sinister man added up to, well, Tom wasn't sure. But clearly, it was something pretty shady. And if what Tash had said about everyone avoiding the building was true, then the Baileys really were the only ones who knew about it. Yeah, it was really suspicious, he agreed. Rosie, who had been sagged on the floor next to Charlotte, now sat up a little straighter. Especially that guy's conversation, Charlotte said. All that stuff about no one finding out what he was doing there. And how someone is locked up inside, Tom said, frowning as he remembered the ominous statement. Oh, man. Exactly, Charlotte said. Something bad is going on in that house. And since that guy wasn't even military, I'm not sure the Army knows about it. Should we tell them? Rosie asked. Tom had been thinking the same thing, but Charlotte shook her head. No, not till we have real evidence. Like the video? Rosie asked. Yeah, Charlotte said, twisting one of her braids thoughtfully. I mean, this is bigger than us. This is bigger than us just making a video to prove Chase wrong. We need to figure out what this guy is up to before something awful happens. But if we can make a video of it exposing the truth, but also showing Tom being brave, then we handle two problems at once. That sounded like a great plan to Tom. So what do we think is going on in that house? He asked, rubbing his hands together. Back when they'd been convinced that their neighbor in Pennsylvania, Mrs. Watkins, was up to something, this had been one of the most fun parts, the brainstorming segment of the mission. Of course, Mrs. Watkins hadn't turned out to be an assassin, but it was obvious something sinister was going on in the building on the post, and Tom was ready to speculate on just what it was. There was silence as each Bailey considered the question. You know, it's possible that guy is doing something illegal, but it's also possible he's in charge of a top secret mission, and looking like a civilian is his cover. Charlotte pursed her lips, then nodded. Yeah, that's a good point, she said. That might actually make more sense because otherwise, how could he get on post? The security is really tight. What if bad guys snuck him in? Rosie asked, or he paid a bribe. That was a good point too. Okay, that's true, Tom said, but if he is doing an undercover mission, I think he's in charge of setting up some kind of jail for really dangerous spies. Those sounds we heard could have been some of the prisoners. Maybe he's creating a zombie army, Rosie suggested, coming in to sit down on Cupcake's other side so she could snuggle with the big dog too. Zombies moan, right? Yeah, Charlotte said, but remember how Tash said the building was haunted by the ghosts of GIs from a failed experiment? A shiver snaked across Tom's skin as he nodded. That makes me think the building is a medical testing site, and they're starting those experiments again, Charlotte said. Her eyes lit up as she explained her theory. Like all those syringes and weird metal tools could be used for operating and injecting serums or whatever they need to create a super soldier. Tom drew in a breath. That really fits, he said, feeling very impressed by his sister's powers of deduction. Charlotte really would make a good spy. Charlotte's cheeks turned pink the way they always did when something pleased her. Thanks, but we shouldn't rule out any of the other theories yet. That means we can't rule out zombies either, Rosie pointed out. Right, we can't rule out zombies yet either, Charlotte said seriously. So we need to go back and break in and find out which one it is, Rosie announced, standing up, ready to go. We don't have time now, Charlotte said with a sigh. Dad's going to be home soon, and he needs us to help get dinner ready. Okay, well then, we should go tomorrow, Rosie said, sitting back down, a bit deflated. That guy said he would be at the building tomorrow, though, Tom pointed out. I don't think we can break in while he's there. That's because you're a scaredy cat, Rosie said, and Tom glared at her. No, Tom's right, Charlotte said, coming to his rescue. It's going to be hard enough to sneak in when the place is empty. We don't want to worry about making noise and having him discover us. Tom tried not to shudder at the thought. He didn't need anyone calling him a scaredy cat again. But Rosie was nodding. Yeah, if we have to throw a rock through the window, it'll be really loud, she said. Charlotte laughed. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, she said. Tom heartily agreed with that. Destroying army property seemed like an especially bad idea. Can we go on Monday after school? Rosie asked. Tom shook his head. I wish we could go. We could go, but I get out late because of detention, and then there's homework. Rosie scowled. We'll just have to wait and try to get inside the house next weekend, Charlotte said, sounding deflated. Cupcake jumped up suddenly, nearly causing Tom to shriek, and ran toward the stairs. A moment later, the front door opened. Hey, everybody, Dad called, and Tom heard Cupcake greeting him. Cupcake was a good spy, too. The way she heard someone coming before human ears could pick up the sound. Hi, Dad, Rosie called. Guess what we... Charlotte waved her hands in panic, and Rosie snapped her mouth shut and covered it, her eyes wide. But luckily, Dad seemed to have gotten distracted by Cupcake, who was frisking and jumping about, her way of asking to be fed. We need to keep our mission a secret, Tom reminded Rosie in a whisper. We'll tell Mom and Dad once we find out what's going on. Otherwise, otherwise they'll just tell us to stay away and not to ask questions, Charlotte said softly. Okay, sorry, Rosie said. Who wants to eat dinner at the officers' club? Dad asked, poking his head into the room a moment later. Me, Rosie shouted. That sounds great, Charlotte agreed. Yeah, I'm starving, Tom said, suddenly aware of how empty his belly felt. And it will be cool to see the officers' club. Although they hadn't lived on post before, they had heard about officers' clubs, so Tom knew the food would be tasty and the place would be fancy. Great, Dad said, then clapped his hands together. Let's put on some finery and head over to the club. Mom had to stop in at her office, so she'll meet us there. Thoughts of dinner replaced thoughts of the mysterious activity in the building as Tom went into his room, where he put on a button-down shirt and clean khaki pants. Then he went downstairs where Dad was wearing his own button-down, a tie, and khakis. Charlotte was wearing a blue dress, and Rosie had put on a pink a pink skirt and matching pink blouse. We're looking good if I do say so myself, Dad said, running a hand over his head. He'd gotten a crew cut in honor of their arrival on post, but still had the habit of reaching up to smooth his hair back. Let's pop fire, Rosie said happily. Tom couldn't help laughing at that. It's pop smoke, he corrected. That doesn't make sense, Rosie said as they walked outside into the balmy warmth of the late afternoon. How was popping smoke like leaving? Tom actually thought this was a good point. Pop smoke was one of those military terms that had never made much sense to him. You got me, he said. Dad gently tousled Rosie's hair. My military speak isn't on par with Mom's, but I think pop smoke is used when you're getting out of a tricky situation, he said. You toss up a smoke grenade to distract the enemy and then slip away while their backs are turned. Cool, Rosie said, and Tom nodded, happy to have that one explained. We all climbed into the minivan and settled in for the drive to the officers' club, which was by the golf course at the far end of the base. Tom gazed out the window as they left their cozy neighborhood, stopping at the main plaza and then turning right onto Gettysburg Drive. The left side of the wide street was Army buildings, the large garage used for vehicle repairs, a storage building, and then the POL, where petrified oil and lubricants were stored and handled. Tom wondered if there was anything secret going on in there, too. That was the cool thing about the post, the endless possibility of undercover missions and hidden activities. And that was on top of the awesome, not secret stuff. I like the obstacle course and the pool. Now the van was driving through a wooded area, sunlight and shadows dappling the road in front of them. When they emerged from the trees, Tom could see the shimmering blue of Lincoln Lake. There was a dock on the far side with a boathouse next to where the family planned to go canoeing over the weekend. The officers' club was on the other side of the lake, overlooking the immense rolling green lawn of the golf course. Dad pulled the van into a parking spot and turned off the engine. It looks like a castle, Charlotte said, gazing up at the club. Tom might have called it more of a fortress, but he could see what his sister was saying. The large stone building with little turrets and a wide path lined with rose bushes leading up to it did seem like it was out of a fairy tale. Where's Mom? Rosie shouted. Oh, there she is. Sure enough, Mom was standing in front of the big wooden doors at the club, looking crisp and official in her dress blues. Tom's heart swelled with pride as two lower ranked officers went past and gave Mom salutes. Mom's arm whipped up, her hand held at a sharp angle as she saluted back. After checking for cars, Dad let Rosie gallop up to Mom, who went from serious officer to goofy mom in half a second. She scooped Rosie up and gave her loud, sloppy kisses. How's my girl? Then she grinned at Charlotte and Tom. And how my big girl and my boy doing? Did you have a good day? Tom saw Charlotte give Rosie a pointed look. We just biked around and stuff, Tom said, deciding that didn't count as a lie since they really had biked and done stuff. Sounds fun, Mom said, leading the way into the elegant main room of the club. The AC felt good to Tom as he made his way across the thick carpet in his stiff leather shoes, taking in their surroundings. Tables draped in crisp white cloths were set around the room, and a buffet with silver chafing dishes and servers stood at the ready to dish up food that smelled delicious. There were fancy paintings on the wall. The ones Tom could see were of famous battles or portraits of war heroes, and not one, not two, but three huge sand chandeliers hung from the ceiling, dripping crystals that sparkled in the soft light. Mom, this is like Belle's castle, Rosie said in a hushed voice. Mom grinned as Charlotte nodded seriously. Tom braced himself for a conversation about princesses, castles, and some new game for their dolls, but then Mom stopped and stood up extra straight. Colonel Sanchez, I'd like you to meet my family, she said to an older man, also in his dress blues. What grade are you all in? The colonel asked, shaking each of the Bailey's hands. He had thinning hair and twinkling eyes, but the way he looked intently at the children as he spoke, as well as his straight posture, made it easy for Tom to imagine him commanding troops. I'm in first grade, sir, Rosie announced. We have an iguana in our classroom, and one day I'm going to feed her. That is splendid, the colonel said. I'm confident you will do an excellent job. For that he received Rosie's most glowing smile. Charlotte and I are in sixth grade, sir, Tom told the colonel. The colonel smiled. I'm sure you'll both work hard and do your mom proud. Yes, sir, Charlotte agreed, while Tom gulped a little, not wanting to think about Chase and school. That would just ruin his appetite. Colonel Sanchez said his goodbyes, and the Baileys were seated in a round table not far from the buffet. The centerpiece was an artful sculpture of flesh, an artful sculpture of fresh flowers, and a long fluted candle, and each place was set with shiny silver and a big goblet, big glass, drinking glass. Why don't you three go ahead to the buffet? I want to introduce Dad to a few more people, said Mom. Tom and his sisters made their way to the food, being sure to start at the beginning of the line and to take some salad, knowing Dad would just send them back if they tried to skip it. I want these, Rosie said as they peered into a steaming, chafing dish filled with fluffy crab cakes in soaking butter. Me too, Tom said. Charlotte, the one Bailey who did not care for seafood in any form, opted for a fancy slice of cheese wrapped in bacon instead. A few minutes later, they had settled back at the table, their plates heaped with fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans, as well as their salad and appetizers. Mom and Dad sat down with their plates a minute later, and everyone dug in. This is yummy, Rosie said. Roger that, Charlotte said, around a mouthful of food. In the brief moment of quiet, while everyone enjoyed their first bites, Tom's thoughts went back to the house and his theory about the jail for escaped spies. And as he bit into his second piece of crispy chicken, he realized there was someone at the table who might be able to help, as long as he was subtle about it. So Tom finished chewing, then cleaned his throat. Cleared his throat. Mom, do posts ever have prisoners? Like maybe off in the woods? Mom grinned. You mean Charlie's chicken farm? She asked. What's that? Rosie asked, so excited about a new military term she nearly tipped over her water glass. Easy there, soldier, Dad said, rescuing the glass. Charlie's chicken farm is what they call the prisoners on post, Mom said, neatly slicing a piece of her steak. They're for minor offenses. If there's a Charlie's chicken farm, is there a Charlie's chicken farm on every post? Rosie asked, clearly delighted with the new term. Affirmative, Mom said. It's on Tipton Drive, right next to the military police office. So chances were the building wasn't a prison, not if they already had one on post. Tom's plate was empty, and he was ready for seconds. A busboy whisked the dirty dish. Goodness, a busboy whisked the dirty plate away, and Tom headed over to the buffet, trying to decide if he wanted to try the steak or the salmon this time. Once he was in front of the serving dishes, he realized it was silly to choose when he could get both. He was just accepting the salmon from the server when he heard voices behind him. You look like a girl out there, a man was saying, his voice oozing scorn. Tom felt his back stiffen at the insult. In his family, like a girl was one of the best compliments out there, and he hated to hear it used as a put down. He turned to see who had said it and then gulped a little. The man had a colonel insignia on his shoulder lapel, though one sleeve of his dress uniform was pinned back. He'd lost an arm, most likely in the line of duty. But that wasn't what made Tom take a small step back and scrunch down. He did that because of the boy whose shoulders were slumped as he scuffed a foot along the rug, the corners of his mouth turned down, as his dad criticized him because that boy was Chase Hammond. I don't know why your mom and I bothered to drive you off post for those practices, Chase's dad continued in the same scathing tone. If you're going to drop the ball on the biggest play of the game. Tom had heard enough, and he did not want Chase to know it. The only thing worse than being scolded in public was knowing that a kid in your class had heard, especially when that kid was the boy you'd already named Sergeant Wimpy. Tom picked up his plate, whispered his thanks to the server, and began slinking back to his table. But just as he passed the appetizers, his stiff leather shoe somehow caught in the thick rug, sending Tom flying and his food tumbling to the ground. Oh my gosh, how embarrassing. What a mess. A waiter hustled over to help Tom get up and clean the offending food off the floor. But there was still collateral damage from Tom's clumsiness. As the waiter pulled him back onto his feet, Tom snuck a look over toward the buffet table. Chase had seen him. Tom looked away as fast as he could and scurried back toward his family, though not before he had seen the humiliation and fury in Chase's eyes at having his father's words clearly overheard. And judging by the intensity of that glare, Tom knew there was no way Chase was backing off his attacks now. That's the end of chapter 15. We'll see you for 16.